Okay. All right. So I guess we go with our first question. So the first question is, I've got a producer here helping me out. If anybody on the live chat on YouTube can just confirm that you can hear my voice. We've got about a 15-second delay here. So first question. I feel kind of stupid asking this, but who is Matt Brainerd? This is a question from Patriots.Win. We'll take some questions, by the way, from the YouTube chat, assuming there are any good ones there. How to begin? I am a political consultant. I've worked on 5 presidential campaigns. I started back in 1994, actually 93, doing community organizing to stop the Hillary Clinton health care bill. And I've just been involved ever since. I've been through maybe 15 congressional election cycles. I've worked for candidates, everything down from town council or even little plebiscites in a precinct to pass a rule to build a new gas station, all the way up to the top of the ticket. So I work for Buchanan, Romney, Trump, and I think I'm missing one other in that mix, but a lot of different campaigns all over the country. In 2017, I started Look Ahead America, which was America First Community Organizing. And it really didn't go anywhere, but it was only after starting the Voter Integrity Project in the aftermath of the 2020 general election that my profile increased enough such that I was able to raise the money necessary to start Look Ahead America. And so far it's been very successful. This year we have been able to, I think, make a big difference. We've been punching way above our weight for an organization with how little funding we have and how short our lifespan has been so far, how we've only been around for about 6 months, and we're already making waves all over the country in all kinds of ways. Speaking about Look Ahead America, in the last 2 months, we've registered about 5,000 voters in the state of Arizona. We have educated legislators in states all across the country about the problems with black box voting equipment or Dominion voting equipment, and educated them about the open source alternatives that are vastly better. We've launched a major initiative in Georgia to get Sunday voting in the rural patriotic counties, not just in the urban counties and progressive counties where it is now. We've also, I think this week we're launching our new America First candidate briefings, where we're approaching first-time candidates who are filing for federal office, House and Senate, and saying to them, hey, we're happy to offer you a free briefing on America First topics. And these are bipartisan to any legitimate file candidate. Our first one is going to be on the abuse of worker visas. We have a research group that's doing a tremendous amount of work documenting the illegal ballot. So far, reports in Georgia and Wisconsin have showed the margin of victory is surpassed by the number of illegal ballots. We're working on our Arizona and Pennsylvania reports now. We've produced countless analyses of voter integrity bills all across the country in many states. In many cases where state legislators say, hey, this bill solves all our problems, and then our analysis shows, well, no, it doesn't, not at all. So just the breadth of what we've been doing, not even considering our Justice for January 6th initiatives, we are very involved with all aspects of community organizing. We have leadership in 40 states. We still need leadership in more. We've got between 2,500 and 3,000 volunteers. We've got 11 or 14 full-time staffers working for us now all across the country. And we're just continuing to grow, continuing to find new donors, continuing to find new volunteers and new ways to make a difference. So Mr. Producer is putting up my questions here. Make sure to give this website a shout out. Yep, that is Patriots.Win. It's a great community, good discussions. It's not censored the way, say, Reddit is, and you're, I think, much freer to speak your mind, particularly if you're on, share our worldview. Let's see, another question I want to answer. Does Trump stand any chance of winning in 2024 if mail-in ballots are still around? Now, I am the executive director of Look Ahead America. We're a nonpartisan nonprofit, but sort of to answer this question, it's really a technical question, so I'm going to sort of take off my LAA hat and put on my my political analyst, political consulting hat. President Trump won in 2016 with mail-in ballots around. Historically, mail-in ballots have favored Republicans. In fact, it was always election day votes that were able to help the Democrats because largely retirees, especially in states like Florida, cast these mail-in ballots. However, mail-in ballots are extremely susceptible to misuse. The prime way we find that they're susceptible to misuse is that people cast them who are not actually entitled to vote in those states. We saw this particularly prevalent in Georgia, where we had, I think, over 10,000 or so people cast ballots through mail who did not actually live in that state, who lived in a faraway place like California or New York. Long ago lost their residency in the state, long ago lost their right to cast a vote in Georgia, and yet they were still able to get them, still able to cast those ballots. Oddly enough, shortly after the 2020 election and the Secretary of State blew off our evidence, he used that same method that we used to detect this to remove over 100,000 voters from the voter roll. So look, mail-in ballots present a challenge. So, okay, well, what's Look Ahead America doing about it? We have 6 public policy initiatives that we rolled out, I think in February, on voter integrity. All across the country, our activists have been educating their state legislators on exactly these initiatives. One of the most important ones is requiring a thumbprint authentication on the absentee ballot. This solves so many problems. It solves many of the problems with harvesting. It solves the problems with who actually casts the ballot. It solves chain of custody issues. And it's relatively inexpensive. It costs maybe a couple pennies per ballot. So we're really encouraged the fact that after we proposed this, we saw it introduced as a law in Texas. Hasn't passed yet, but these things take time. These things take years. You've heard about the Help America Vote Act, H.R. 1. That thing's been around for a long time. It wasn't just introduced this cycle. So, and that still hasn't passed, still hasn't garnered enough support. So these things do take time, but you know what makes them go faster is when we have activists that we train going to their state legislators to talk to them about it and educate them about it. I'll tell you that we get a lot of feedback. Whenever we send a volunteer activist to go speak to a state legislator, we ask, okay, give us a report afterwards. And in many cases, well, 2 things happen. Number 1, state legislators are not at all used to constituents coming up and talking to them about anything, really. And maybe around election time, they get a little heat or something, they have some town halls. But to have a constituent, a real constituent who's not a lobbyist for a foreign corporation or something like that, try to make an appointment and come to explain something to them, they are shocked by that. And it is overwhelmingly influential, especially when you don't go alone. Second thing, though, is that many of these state legislators, they don't know anything about this stuff. So you truly are educating them on this. Many of them get elected. Maybe they have a really good knowledge of maybe 10% of what state government does, kind of a knowledge about 40%, but the rest of it to them, they just do what their staff or what leadership tells them. So it's a real opportunity to influence them by educating them in that way. And that is right at the heart of community organizing. And it is a field that's been dominated by the left for generations, and we're taking it over. Matt, could you please share some of your courage for online doomers? First, my comments here are directed not at the supposed armchair patriot leaders in the country, those doomers. I'm just talking about the grassroots or potential grassroots, the people who are just maybe they know that they support certain candidates, they have a certain worldview, they log into Patriots.Win and they hear this person that they think they're supposed to respect because they've got a studio and a podcast somewhere, or because they have a lot of followers on Twitter and they're feeling kind of down because of what the person says. In reality, these people make very little difference in the world. In reality, they contribute very little to the successes that our side has had. They like to take credit for it, but there's really nothing they can point to take credit for it. So the question is, first of all, who's convincing you to be a doomer, and should you listen to them at all? What have they done to earn your trust? Maybe they've entertained you. Some of these guys are very entertaining. Some of these guys and gals have a good wit, and I understand that when you're doing homework or on the treadmill, it might be interesting to listen to them, but should you trust them? And I think that after what happened this Saturday, maybe you should reconsider that trust and reconsider who you can trust. The other thing I would say to the doomers is, look, you've got it really easy. You've got it really easy. You have no idea the kinds of sacrifices it took to start this country. You have no idea the sacrifices that your forebears had to withstand to survive, to create the environment that you now enjoy. You don't have people shooting at you. You're not having to cross the Delaware on Christmas Eve in freezing weather to fight the world's greatest military force. You're not even having to face many of the battles that the early civil rights movement did. Nobody's sicking dogs on you or spraying you down with fire hoses or threatening you with that kind of violence. So what are we asking you to do? Oh, stand outside Home Depot with the voter registration forms. Write a letter to your city councilman. Recruit your friends on social media to come and join and volunteer for Look Ahead America too. Come out to hear one of our speakers who will tell you how to become a better activist, who will teach you lobbying techniques on how to swing your school board away from teaching CRT. Those are the things we're asking you. Those are the sacrifices. So there's really no reason for a doom. Just to circle back to the doom, a lot of people use that doom as a cope and an excuse not to get involved. It's a crutch. Oh, it's not going to work out anyway. It's going to go horribly. I'm just going to sit here and smoke pot and watch pornography and whatever other waste of time that you have in front of you. It's just an excuse not to get involved, not to sign up with Look Ahead America or whatever other organization motivates you. So doom is a cope. Get over it. Matt, is the United States currently in a cold civil war? Yes, but we've always been in a cold civil war. It just gets a little bit warmer at times, a little bit cooler. This is a battle that's been going on in this country for a very long time, at least my entire lifetime, probably longer. I'm not even sure really when it started. You know, at the rally this week, we played one of Billy Joel's songs, We Didn't Start the Fire. I actually got a letter from his people warning us not to play that song again. But if you think about it, you know, we didn't start the fire. I don't know how long it's been going on, but we're just trying to fight it. Is America damaged beyond repair, or is there still hope for true Americans? The answer is I don't know. But all I do know is what I can do about it. I know what I can control, and I know I've got, like you, a finite amount of time on this planet, and I've decided what to do with it. And what I've decided to do with it is to help save this country. And you have the same choice. You can still make a decision about what you want to do, where you want to try to make it a difference if you can at all. It's, again, black-pilling. I mean, I don't think technically anybody's more black-pilled than I am. I'm so black-pilled I came in through the other side. And once you sort of realize that, you know what, maybe it's all going to go to hell anyway, you kind of have to decide what you're going to do with what's left of your life. And I'm hoping to set an example, and the other people at Look Ahead America are setting an example. The state leaders who are holding those 17 state capital rallies on their own, many of whom with no political background. Most of them, I don't know, 3 to 4 months, were just like you until they raised their hand and said, look, I want to lead volunteers in my state. What can I do? We gave them some initial training. We gave them support. We gave them lots of encouragement. And now they're getting permits for rallies. They're running radio ads. They're making sure they have some kind of security plan. They were just like you a few months ago, but they decided to step up and do something. And I encourage you to follow their example. Matt, did conservatives hosts that opposed the J6 rally last weekend contact you directly? Did they try to understand your position? Many of whom follow me on Twitter, many of whom have my cell phone number, many of whom I've spoken with before. No. And look, I'm really kind of disappointed about that. But on the other hand, again, we are about, what are we, technically 8 months into our relaunch, right? So what we're finding out early, it's better to find this out early, is who you can trust and who you can count on. So I'm glad that we're finding this out early. I'm glad that you're finding this out early too. Look Ahead America, it's not like a political campaign. Political campaigns have a lifespan of about a year, maybe 2 years, and then the race is over, they win or lose, and you know, that's kind of the end of it. Or some kind of like short-term organization that doesn't really stick around very long and descends into a grift like the Tea Party did. Look Ahead America is a 100-year project. It is a 100-year project. The reason the left is so successful, the reason they've achieved what you've seen them achieve in this country, they didn't just wake up yesterday with the success. They have been at this. You can track it all the way back to the early 20th century, if not longer. Many of the things they are accomplishing now, these have been plans they've set into place long ago. And look, You've heard of the NAACP. You've heard of the ACLU. You've heard of them. You have no idea who started them. But those organizations have been around a very, very long time. And as much as we may disagree with them, we cannot disagree that they have had success. Just look at our name. Look ahead, America. It's all there. So this is a very long-term project. And we are glad that you're here at the ground level. But remember, the people who are revealing themselves now who should have known better, or at least, look, if you're an intelligent person and you heard about this rally, you had some questions about it, before going and running your mouth about it, you say, hey, let me just go give Matt Brainerd a call, because we know he's the guy in charge of it. We know his history. We'll just say, hey, what's all this about? And then we could at least give them an earful about it and say, look, I mean, we've done about 10 of these already, 2 in the District of Columbia. We know what we're doing. And it's very important that we do this. Anyway, Matt, do the J6 prisoners that had the horrible public defenders now have competent representation? Besides donate, is there anything else we can do? There is the litigation side of this, and there's really not a whole heck of a lot you can do. We actually contacted every lawyer that is representing any J6 defendant. We have built a wonderful database thanks to Ian Camacho and the research group at lookatamerica.org/J6. It's the most comprehensive database of all of those arrested, and in that is a list of all of their legal representation. So we reached out to them. We pretty much got the cold shoulder universally, and I think that there's really nothing we can do on that side. If there's somebody whose case you feel passionate about, look them up, find out who their attorney is, and ask, hey, can I make a contribution? But there's really no interfering, that chain between the judiciary system, the lawyer, and the defendant, where we can't get involved with that. But what we can get involved with is the legislative side and the administrative side. What we need are more federal legislators, senators, and congressmen to raise Cain about the mistreatment, to demand hearings into the mistreatment, to the disparate treatment. So that's really where our effort is, and we're really right now a PR operation of educating the public so it shows up in poll numbers, because it's the only thing that most federal legislators care about, sadly, so that then they start to respond, they start to demand hearings, they start putting demands on the Department of Justice. So that's kind of our game plan, but it's not the only game plan, and I think that there are probably some legal defense funds that are doing some other things on that front to help them raise money. But in terms of changing anything on the litigation side, that's pretty much a no-go zone for us. I'm just looking through the questions here that Mr. Producer's put up. What person in American politics today do you think represents the biggest threat to our liberties? Which person represents the greatest hope for them? That's a really good question. And it's the same person. It's you. Next question. Matt, I listened to your interview with Sarah Mims. Oh, I really enjoyed that one. You held your own so well. What tactics do you use to resist such people? What are tactics we should all use that work? Okay. So, again, taking off LAA hat a little bit, putting on my political consultant hat, I prep candidates on how to deal with the media. And I'll share that advice with you guys here for free. Because, I do this. This is how I earn a living, and I'm not cheap, but I'll give you these freebies. The first thing you've got to, well, there's 3 concepts to understand, okay? The first is sort of an overall concept. And this is how you kind of get panicky often when media comes knocking on your door and asking you tough questions, especially the first time you do it. You're going to get nervous. Just don't worry about it, okay? Be calm. The important thing to remember is that most hostile media, almost all hostile media, nobody that matters to you really takes any of them seriously. I'm going to repeat that. For hostile media, I'm talking about New York Times, Washington Post, all those folks who think because they write for some big name publication or they're with, I don't know, CNN or whatever, they think that they demand your response, demand your attention because they're CNN. The reality is, nobody that really matters to us in terms of who's reachable and who's gettable to us takes them seriously, gives a damn about what they report. And also, their audiences are still quite minuscule. I mean, I don't think Mr. Producer knows these numbers very well. Very few of their shows penetrate, break a million eyeballs. And this is a country of, I don't know, 340 million people. I don't know, 200 million potential voters or more, if not many more. So their audience is small. Don't let them rattle you. And most people that you care about, most people who are even gettable to you, they don't believe what they say anyway. The New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, they have no credibility. Let them say whatever the hell they want. And the funny thing is that when you refuse to go along with them, they get even nastier towards you in their reporting. But that makes them even less credible to anybody who might consider taking them seriously, right? Second thing, so reporters and journalists, the rule is this, is they can ask you whatever they want to ask you, okay? But you can answer it however you want. So they have the power to ask you whatever question they want to ask. You have the power to answer it however you want. And then they'll say, oh, well, you didn't answer my question. No, I answered that. I answered it. Question asked, question answered. That was my answer. Now let's talk about the third concept I sort of try to explain to my clients. And that is that oftentimes journalists, they're not there to get the story. They're not there to tell the truth. They're there to humiliate you, to make you look bad so that they can farm clicks. It's not really legit journalism. I mean, there's this fantasy about what journalism is, and it's this noble cause, almost like a priesthood, but it's really not. They want clickbait. They're clickbait farmers. So they want to get something that their hard left audience at MSNBC or CNN will click, 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 click when they see the headline and share of, oh, look at this right-wing doofus saying something stupid. That's what they're after. So they'll often ask you something that's completely ridiculous. And this is the method I suggest for responding, if you must. And it's called slap and pivot. They come up to you with a ridiculous premise, like, why are you standing up for rioters who assaulted police officers, okay? So the way you answer that question is you just immediately slap down the premise, slap it down, and you say, we completely condemn all political violence. Anybody that engages it deserves to be given a speedy trial and sentenced to prison. And then you pivot to talking, and we also demand equal justice under the law. People who were treated, who were nonviolent trespassers during the Kavanaugh hearings got a $50 fine. I've met with them personally. People who did this during January 6th are still in prison without a conviction after 9 months in solitary confinement. So you slap down their stupid premise with a very broad general statement, and then you pivot to talk about whatever the hell you want to talk about. And there's really nothing they can do about it because you ultimately have the power. That was a long answer. The next question, do you consider it a secondary success that the only person arrested at the rally was an undercover cop? I wouldn't call that a secondary success. I'm not even really, in fact, the media reporting on this is wrong. And I know, look, whoever asked that question, you can't help the fact that the facts that you're restating that you got from the media are incorrect. They weren't an undercover cop. They were an off-duty ICE officer who was entitled because of their privileges to carry that firearm where they had it. So they weren't even an undercover cop. They just wanted to come see the rally. I guess they had finished their shift today at ICE or whatever, walked over, wanted to see what it was all about. And one of our observant attendees noticed something, said something, cops came and checked it out. And I also don't really think he was even technically arrested. He was just escorted away, and he certainly wasn't charged. So even in the small details, plenty of misinformation. And when misinformation is intentional, we call it disinformation. I've seen reports saying there were 4 people arrested at a rally. No, there were 0 people arrested at our rally. There were 2 people unrelated to us in a distant area that were arrested. Who knows if they were even coming to a rally, had anything to do with us. I'm sure if they would, we would have known about it by now. In probably one of the most dangerous cities in the country, Washington, D.C., formerly the murder capital. So honestly, any assembly of people not having an incident in D.C., I mean, I don't care if it's a hula hoop contest, for there not to be an incident is remarkable. But the whole plan was that, look, we are peaceful. We're exercising our First Amendment right to petition our government. The left in this country, they won't admit this, but they loved what happened on January 6th. They want it to happen all the time. They want you either apathetic or violent. And apathy, in many ways, leads to resentment and anger, and that eventually leads to violence. Because when there's violence, even if it's small, or even law-breaking, like, again, trespassing, going where you're not supposed to go, it's easy to deal with you because they can just stick the FBI on you. But when you're peaceful, you're obeying the law, you're using your First Amendment rights completely constitutionally, they have no idea how to deal with us. That's why the fences went up. That's why the guard tower went up. That's why the stormtroopers came out. That's why there was so much language ahead of this in the media. It was meant to deter you from exercising your First Amendment rights. Why? Because they want you apathetic and they want you violent. And you know, this has happened before. This was what happened during the original civil rights movement in this country during the 50s and 60s. They were constantly infiltrated by the FBI to try to encourage them to engage in violence. Because then it discredits the whole movement. Then you can send in the police after them, arrest them, prosecute them, throw them in jail. But as Gandhi showed us, as Martin Luther King showed us, as other civil rights leaders showed us, this is the way. It's simple. Voter registration, voter education and turnout, lobbying your state legislators, educating them, doing mass protests, filing lawsuits, which we've also been engaged with. This is how you win, and it's easy to become cynical about it because honestly, we have in this movement elevated a bunch of grifters into leadership who are not capable of organizing a paper airplane contest and consider them to be our leaders. But let me ask you, how many precincts do those people control? How many voters have they registered themselves? Oh, they have a talk show. Oh, they go to a college campus and set up a little table and say, oh, debate me. I'm fighting for conservatism. Mostly their audience is just people who believe with what they already believe already. They already agree with them, so they're just regurgitating. It's actually, I think the best description for it is conservative pornography. It doesn't produce anything. It's a lot of, it seems fun to watch and engage with. Oh, watch him own those libs. Let me hit that share button on Facebook. Oh, I got this great video from my auntie. Oh, look at the way, you know, he defeated that lib with facts and logic. That does not make for progress. Community organizing does. And we know it's true because that's how the left did it. That's how they've become so ascendant. They didn't do it by doing college debates and having podcasts and with a bunch of their leaders, you know, grifting off of super chats. They did it through community organizing, and that is why I created Look Ahead America. We've got to counter that. We cannot surrender this field to them anymore. How do I feel that this website and other places called your event this past weekend a trap set by the FBI? I understand how people can be misled, but now you know who you can trust and who you can't. What states, oh, I love this question. What states do you still need leadership for LAA? What states do you still need volunteers? I, off the top of my head, don't have a list of the states where we don't have leaders. However, if you look at our list at lookaheadamerica.org/rally of where we're having state rallies, look at the states that aren't, because those are places where our state leadership still needs help. A few months ago, we actually did our rally at the prison, and we did simultaneous rallies all across the country. I think we did 8 or 9 of them. Now we've got, I think, technically 15. 2 of them happened this weekend. In addition to DC, it was we had Washington State and North Carolina on Saturday, the same Saturday. So we actually have another 13 on the board. So anyway, 15 total, I believe, compared to 8 or 9 a few months ago. That's growth and progress. But it ain't 50 or 57, depending on who you ask. So we definitely need more, and we definitely need more volunteers. Just sign up. We have a full-time, our national volunteer coordinator, Caroline. Once you sign up to volunteer, she's aware of it. If you're in a state where the leadership is organized, you immediately go into our volunteer management system. Somebody should be reaching out to you, educating you on the first steps to take. Let's see, and I'll ask Mr. Producer, please do not delete the question until I finish answering it, because sometimes I lose myself and I want to, wait, what was the question again?
Leadership and volunteers.
How can we wake up the woke 48% approval rating even after all this has gone on, open board, etc.? Again, Look Ahead America is nonpartisan, but just getting involved in your community. Just taking small steps. I'm a big believer in finding small victories, easy wins that you can then build on. So this is one of the easy wins we're targeting right now. We'll be rolling it out in the next couple of weeks. And that is to get school boards to pass resolutions. They're essentially anti-CRT or pro-American history. In favor of supporting teaching children about what a great country you have, how great our founders were, etc. Despite whatever blemishes they may have had, they accomplished something remarkable. Now, a resolution, well, it doesn't have the power of law. But what's nice about a resolution is it's very easy to pass. A member of the school board can introduce it. It doesn't have to go through any kind of legal wrangling. It's basically a sense of sense. It's an expression. I've seen the U.S. Congress pass resolutions congratulating somebody for winning on American Gladiators, right? But it's something that's easily achievable, right? To just express the sense of a school board that we believe America is a great country, the greatest country on earth, and we believe that our founders were very wise men to whom we owe so much. Okay, something like that. We have the language. We'll be sharing it, I think, next week. It's a low bar, though. Anybody can go and do that and start saying to their school board members, okay, who's going to sponsor it? And what's also nice about it is it sets a precedent, so that now you know who on the school board is on your side. Now, maybe they refuse to vote on it. Maybe a few vote for it, but the majority vote against it, right? Well, guess what? Now you know who your enemies are. And you've also learned a lot in just the process of trying to get this done. Because there's always two things going on with everything we do, especially right now. Look at the big rallies for justice for J6, the ones we're having all over the country, right? This is about fighting for the disparate treatment of those political prisoners and demanding transparency, right? That's the top line of what it's about. What it's also about is those neophyte political leaders in these states, our state volunteer coordinators, learning how to do things for the first time, learning how to put on an event, learning how to get a permit, learning how to deal with police, learning how to promote an event, learning how to turn out a crowd, learning how to talk to media. So that next time we have to do something like that, they've got legacy knowledge, they've got experience that they can draw on. So this is almost kind of practice, because if something like this happens a few years from now, our response will be much better. And you know that if something like this had happened to the left, none of those people would still be in prison right now. We know it because we've seen it. But we saw it at the 2016 inaugural. So this is really about building institutional knowledge, giving people the chance to learn through this process. And when you go and try to pass this anti-CRT resolution, maybe you win, maybe you lose, but in the process, you're going to learn a hell of a lot. So the next time you try to do something like this, you'll be a lot more effective. Matt, do you think we will ever have fair elections in the country again? Well, fair is kind of a binary. Either it's fair or it isn't fair. And the truth is that in every election, there's always illegal ballots cast, ballots that should not be cast, that were, or say disputes where a ballot is counted a certain way, it should have been counted another way, those types of things. Historically, though, the margins of victories have always been enough that we've always been saved from having an election decided by illegal ballots. I don't believe that was the case in 2020. Now, hopefully this doesn't get the video pulled on YouTube, but I think that there were a lot of illegal ballots in 2020. Let me leave it at that. So to get to fair elections, we have our public policy initiatives. And I believe that if you passed all 6 of them, or even just a few of them, you get a lot further along towards having fair elections. And while some states are very hostile to this, hostile to most of them, a majority of the Electoral College, I believe, are controlled by state legislators that support the Patriot cause. And if we bring that pressure to bear, a majority of the Electoral College can have fair elections. And when a majority of them do, then you end up with a fair outcome overall. But more important than that, and this is something that I think you don't hear from any of the other people who are sort of these so-called experts on illegal ballots or voter fraud or whatever, is that what had a 100 to 1,000 times bigger impact on the election than the illegal ballots was the tremendous effort the left made to educate, register, and turn out their voters in their urban progressive bases. They invested hundreds of millions in this project over the last 4 years. And on the right, there was nothing to match that. Right now, fortunately, I think we're doing our best to match that in Arizona, thanks to some very generous contributions we have there that are specifically earmarked to voter registration. In other states, we're starting to roll out voter registration efforts. And I'll also say that all of our rallies for the following 15, they will be places where you can register to vote. So we're going to be doing voter registration at every event we have so far, and trying to do it in a more targeted way. So, I mean, that's really how you get, it's not just fair elections, but you've got to have robust elections where your people are registered, they can vote, and they're not left on the sidelines. Okay, well, let me just go to the next question. Matt, if we can't fix the elections, can we still win if the federal government is so corrupt and partisan? It's a long process, and it's not going to be solved just by one election. And it's not going to just be solved at the national level. It's got to happen at the state level and the local level. You've got to start with your community. You've got to start with your city and your county government and then your state government. I think that the federal government is just so inherently corrupt, it will take a very long time in electing the right people for a very long sustained period of time. And I think that we've edged closer to that at times. I think that previous Congresses, especially when they sort of forced these budget rescissions that reduced government spending as a compromise for increasing the debt limit, that was a very successful tactic. And it actually yielded real reduction in government spending because, look, you got to follow the money. It's hard to fight the corruption. It's much easier just to cut the budgets. Less money means less money for corruption. But again, it kind of goes back to your state and your local government where you can make the bigger difference. What would you say is the number one thing an average citizen could be doing right now to help secure elections in the future, knowing that they are now completely out of our hands? Simple. It sounds, I'm biased to say this, but volunteer for Look Ahead America. We will put you to work. We will give you the tools you need to make a difference. There's other ways. Maybe you find another organization that's close to your heart, that's maybe closer to one of your passions that you can get excited about volunteering for. Do that. But you've got to get engaged. No one's going to save you. There's no them. There's just us. There's you and me in this audience right now. And unless you take action, I'm not going to be able to do this by myself. I'll tell you that right now. So I need your help. And your fellow citizens who are in this arena with me right now, the folks that showed up at that rally on Saturday who had the courage to do so despite everyone telling them not to, that's not nearly enough people. We need your help. We need your help back in the states and in your local community. So you've got to get involved. You cannot count on others. You've got to really make it a priority in your life. It's like something you care about. Set aside 5, 10 hours a week that you're going to pledge towards community service. You're going to have to cut back on other things that currently occupy your time. So, and look, the American Revolution was started by a very small, tiny minority. I'm not saying we need everybody, but if you're paying enough attention that you're still listening to me blather on, you really ought to get involved. So you don't really have an excuse. Matt, why are there not more people suing counties for a forensic audit? So forensic audits, that is a recently invented term. And what that means different things to different people. And also, I'll be frank, I think a lot of the effort that I've seen put into this in many places is often and typically by, you can leave those questions. If you want to put a number next to them, then I can just tell you which ones to delete. That's fine. I see a lot of effort into things like canvassing. And I made a video about canvassing. I guess we'll link to it later. But I think in certain circumstances, it may have utility. But the reality is that canvassing, this quote-unquote canvassing, we can identify thousands of suspect voters immediately electronically. It's a waste of time to have people going door to door. It's fraught with problems because when people are going door to door, again, I'd like to refer to my earlier video. I think we'll post it maybe in the comments to this or in the description later of what all the real problems with that. But what you'd be better doing with that time is standing at a county fair or a rodeo or a gun show or a gun shop or a gym or a Home Depot or a Costco registering voters. We have a database of millions of unregistered voters in this country who are supportive of the patriotic cause. We need somebody to go knock on their door. We need somebody to give us the money so we can give them a direct mail piece prompting them or a phone call prompting them. So that if you really want to make a difference, focus on voter registration efforts rather than these, going and knocking on a bunch of doors to see if a voter really lives there, because I have done that extensively. I know how it works and I know all the problems with it. And I can just tell you, in a nutshell, it's done much more easily electronically using various databases. Number two, nothing you produce from it is going to be actionable to a state government because they actually have the tools to also do it much better than even I can. In addition to registering voters, pressuring your state legislators to pass laws that force true voter list hygiene, taking advantage of driver's license databases, the NCOA databases, etc. Like I said, the Georgia Secretary of State snapped his fingers and erased 100,000 voters who didn't belong to those rolls anymore. think about the time it would take to knock on enough doors to find 100,000 illegitimate voters. That probably means you need to knock on like 2 million doors if you're going to do a canvassing effort to find that number of people, and you're probably going to have a lot of false positives. All that energy. It could have definitely registered multiples of the number of voters that made the difference in the election in 2020. Question 1, what advice do you have for those of us in deep blue West Coast areas? Move. But if you can't do that, look for easy wins in your community and start to grow. Look, California wasn't always the way it was. It was once a different way, and some of that has to do with demographics. But if you start in your community, organizing a group of people who share your same view, and set a easy goal, have a small win of, let's say there are 10 community events, have a table at each of those community events for the year. A good table where you're recruiting more people, and you commit to holding like 2 speaking events, right? Where people come and educate. You can do that. There's not a person in this audience who isn't capable of doing exactly that. It's a small victory. So just find the victories that you can get, even if you're in the middle of hell. Just find those small victories, lock them in and achieve them, put them on the board, and then you can move on to something a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger. So done with question 1. Matt, are LA planning to run the same election verification project you're running after the last election? Actually, we like to run it before the election. Part of that is just a matter of funding. We're getting close to kind of the deadline in Virginia. They're starting to vote, so we probably are not going to be able to make a difference for the 2021 elections. But in key states, if we can get the kind of funding we need to identify en masse voters who should probably not be on the voting list anymore and bring them to the state may ignore them, in which case then we can potentially bring a lawsuit. All of that is unfortunately very expensive. We have a lot of activities we have people engaged in that just eat up volunteer hours. We love volunteer hours, we'll take advantage of them. Some things are just unavoidable for, they just cost money. That kind of data just costs money. So if somebody wanted to make a contribution to Earmark and say, hey, ahead of the 2022 election, I want to get the voter list in Ohio cleared, look ahead. Can you help us with that? We could probably give you guys a budget for that. Number 4, is fighting vaccine mandates part of your agenda? So, and that's question 5. I'm done with 2. 4, is fighting vaccine mandates your part of your agenda? Broadly speaking, it is. And I'll tell you how we work. Is that we are a nonprofit. We're very small. We have a very limited budget. Typically, we need to tie our activities to a potential revenue stream for raising money. Most of the time, we raise money from our donors. And we'll pitch them like, hey, we need, and most of our average donation is about $20. We have one donor who earmarked a large sum for just Arizona voter registration. Outside of that, our average contribution is maybe between $20 and $50. So we typically have to tie all of that directly to any effort we're engaging in to a revenue stream. Now, sometimes if it's a small project, we'll start the project in hopes of getting funding for that later, like our effort in Georgia to bring Sunday voting to the patriotic rural counties the same way we have it in the progressive urban counties. And we're hoping we'll eventually, somebody will say, hey, I'll pay. But otherwise, we're just sort of floating that with money we have from the national budget. Sorry, you deleted the question that I was still answering. So yeah, vaccine mandates. We'd like to get into that, but right now we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. So right now our focus is on voter integrity, justice for J6, and state-related projects. Now, state-related projects, interested. All of our state volunteer coordinators, we're always encouraging them to find something in their state that they can get behind, that they can put up as a win, that they can rally volunteers behind. So if there is a state volunteer coordinator who says, look, the state is looking at a vaccine mandate, or a school board is looking at it, or something like that, can we get engaged? We have a conversation with them, and if we think it's something that's doable, we give it our full support. So the state volunteer coordinators have a lot of latitude. We're about to get involved with the CRT battle, and we're also really engaged with getting rid of black box voting equipment from companies like Dominion. And we're engaged in that, I think, right now in California, New Hampshire, Mississippi, and a few other states. So it's a little bit of a patchwork, but like ideally we'd like to have a broad portfolio like so many of these left-wing organizations do, but for now we're kind of narrow-casted. Ideologically, do we oppose vaccine mandates for the COVID vaccine? Yes. Are we going to pick up that fight and make it our central issue? We can't, but I'd like to get to the point someday where I can just say to, we have a national director for that particular issue and say, look, make this happen, figure out what states we can move this in and get on it. And we'll get there someday with your help. You were called, this is question 1, you were called as an expert witness in the election lawsuit in Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin. Can you please talk about the evidence you saw of widespread fraud? The most fraud we saw was self-initiated, where somebody cast a ballot they should not have been able to cast, or somebody cast it in their name. And determining the distinction between the two is not something that anything outside of the government would ever really be able to do. So again, people who thought, my vote doesn't matter here in New York City, but I went to college in Georgia and I seem to have been able to get a ballot. I'm going to cast it there. And in a close election, where it's just separated by a few thousand votes, where people are very passionate and more inclined to cast illegal ballots than they would be otherwise, because gosh, they really hate one of those guys running for office. They'll break any law it takes to get them out of there. It seemed to make the difference. So, and I would add though that in Wisconsin, I thought there was also a special case where people were using the no ID excuse to cast a indefinitely confined ballot despite not making indefinitely confined status. And the problem with that is not only is it an illegal ballot, but it's also not possible to really know who cast it because unlike every other way of voting in Wisconsin, it does not require an ID. And we believe that's similar to the case that, we're finding similar things in Arizona, and there are other, let's say, similar issues in Pennsylvania. Question 1 is done. Question 2, when is the next Justice for J6 rally in DC? We don't have one planned for right now. Our focus right now is going back out to the states. On the Justice for J6 movement, we're thinking about what our next steps will be, but what it's really about now is showing that the public is increasingly on our side on this issue, and that is pretty much the only way we're going to convince federal legislators to take action on it, because that's what we really want. That's what we really want. And it doesn't have to be a partisan issue either. And we've seen indications that there's some on the left that are particularly sympathetic to our cause, or at least we just need them to, and many of them know they're sympathetic to our cause, but they just haven't had yet the courage to stand up for it because they know the moment they do, whew, oh boy. You think Manchin and Sinema have a rough time right now. Imagine somebody like that speaking up for, say, the nonviolent offenders who have been held in solitary confinement for 9 months because they think the wrong thing. 3, what would be a more effective approach, countering CRT in schools or promote homeschooling? Why not both? That's question 3. I think that promoting homeschooling it's a great cause, and there are some folks that are very good at it. I think that the approach for that, though, that exists sort of in a different sphere than our approach to CRT, which is marching into school board meetings and saying, look, this is wrong, we want you to pass this resolution. So there's a place for both of those things. The fight for LA right now is in the school board meeting rooms. Now, if, down the road, could we get more engaged with making it easier for people to do homeschooling in terms of, public relations or in terms of encouraging government to take steps? Possibly. Although I did recently moderate a focus group of homeschool mothers who try to get good ideas from them about what government could do to help homeschooling. And it's kind of a tricky thing because a lot of them don't want the government to do anything, not even vouchers, because they believe that those vouchers will come with strings attached. They don't want anything like that. So that is all in its own a very tricky thing to have to tackle. But our sphere is in community organizing, educating state legislators, educating school boards. So on that front, yeah, we're going to try to pass these CRT resolutions. Can we do something with homeschooling in the future? Homeschool moms, please volunteer for us. Please encourage your kids to volunteer for us. I think that actually would be really effective. Question 2, how do we promote the state rallies to people outside our circles? Good question. That's question 2. I'm done with question 1. Well, first, maybe don't worry about that so much. Let's just worry about promoting it inside your circle. How many people can you bring with you? I've said over and over again, we want to put wins on the board. Let's find small victories. So maybe your small victory is just to bring, if they were having one in your rally, just to bring one person with you. And consider that is your goal. You set it and you meet it. And that's mission accomplished. Getting outside your circles, when you've completely saturated them with your message and you've gotten everybody you can, you live in a neighborhood, right? Get a friend, obviously, preferably somebody of the opposite sex, and get some pamphlets, print them up at the local post office, go use the copying machine, and just do door to door. And if somebody's not there to answer, just slide it in the door, let them know about the upcoming rally. I say opposite sex, again, this is getting into political field operations, but you always want to have a guy and a girl if you can. The guy's there to make sure, to stop anybody from getting fresh with the girl. The girl is there because a guy by himself is kind of creepy, and the girl completely, neutralizes that creep vibe. So I think it's a good pairing. Question 1 is done. Matt, is there anything positive coming out your J6 rallies for our political prisoners? Yes. First of all is that, I've seen a lot of people in the media, again, lying, imagine that, spreading disinformation about the number of people that were at the rally in DC. Both Epic Times and Not the Bee put it at about 400 of our people. I mean, that's honestly my count. Look, I would have loved there to be 4,000. But even if there were just 10 people there or a dozen people there, it doesn't really matter, because even if I had 10,000 people there, that number would still be dwarfed by the number of people who got it on C-SPAN, on all the cable news networks, all the channels that were there covering it, all of the cameras everywhere, all the coverage. Never in my wildest dreams could I turn out as many people to that rally as ended up seeing it because of how much media it got. I knew it was a success before it even happened, because I would get my alerts every day showing everywhere that Look Ahead America has mentioned the news. All of the local stations from coast to coast on television and radio were running packages on it, hyping it. And I was getting emails from people who said, I'd never heard about this until now. I'm so glad I discovered it. I heard about it, it was a critical story about it, but it piqued my curiosity. And here I am now aware of the effort. So that is incredibly positive. The second thing that's positive that came out of it is that a bunch of you people who were listening to these false prophets saying that we can't do these things, the First Amendment isn't for us, just give up, or we've got to have some violent insurrection, that's the only way we're going to fix things. Now you know those people are liars. Now you know they don't know what they're talking about. And now you know who you can trust. And you know that the First Amendment still belongs to us, and that we're going to use it to its maximum. 3, I'm ready to get rid of black box voting. That's great. Sign up to Look Ahead America, and we'd be happy to give you the tools, the one-page tip sheet on how to get involved, and start with your local school board. I'm sorry, your local board of education. Maybe your school board too. Maybe they'd be interested as well. Or at least your state legislator, your state senator. Schedule a meeting. Bring our one-pager. Educate them on the problems with it. And it's really simple, because black box voting equipment, you don't have to believe an election was stolen by it. We've never said that the black box voting machine stole the election. That's never been a statement from Look Ahead America. What we have said is that those machines lack transparency. What we have said is those machines cost twice as much as the open source options. What we have said is that the closed source options require you to bring in contractors from far away. In fact, maybe even international corporations. Open source means, hey, your local tech shops can repair them. They create home state jobs. And even if you hated everything about the accusations about the machines, to a state legislator, the opportunity to save money and create more home state jobs, who could turn that down? And that argument can't be made by me to your state legislator. It has to be made by you. So I think we're going to wrap it up. I'm glad that we did this. I'm very grateful for Patriots.Win for having me on. We can turn off the lights in here, and you can see for a fact that I do not glow. But look, I hope the message you come away from this is that community organizing matters, and that it's dependent upon you. You can't be a spectator anymore. You don't have an excuse anymore. We've shown you it can be done right before your lying eyes. We've shown you it can be done. So please get up off the couch and go to lookaheadamerica.org/volunteer. Tell us what you can do, and we'll put you to work. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope we can do it again sometime.